Welcome back to Heritage of Our Fathers. Today we will be talking about the fall of the Great Benin Empire by the British invasion of 1897. The air over Benin in the late 19th century was heavy with tension, though the people of the ancient kingdom continued their daily lives with dignity and tradition. The royal city, surrounded by massive earthen walls and moats, was a marvel. Its bronze heads and ivory carvings told the stories of centuries past. At its heart stood Oba Ovaramwen Nogbaisi, a monarch proud, resilient, and deeply tied to the gods of his ancestors. But beyond Benin's forest borders, the shadow of empire loomed larger with every passing year. The British, hungry for control of trade routes and resources, saw Benin not as a sovereign kingdom, but as an obstacle to their growing colonial ambitions. In the early 1890s, Britain sought to bend Benin to its will. The kingdom was wealthy in palm oil, ivory, pepper, and other trade goods, but Benin insisted on managing its commerce in its own way, through controlled markets and rituals overseen by the Oba. For the British, this independence was unacceptable. They demanded free trade. Benin resisted. At the center of this clash stood two worlds, one ancient, spiritual and sovereign, the other industrial, expansionist and driven by profit. In 1897, tension boiled over. A British delegation led by Acting Consul General James Phillips prepared to march into Benin, demanding concessions. Though it was supposed to be a peace mission, it carried hidden motives: to depose the Oba and bring Benin fully under British control. Warnings were given. Benin was in the midst of sacred rituals at the time, and the Oba could not receive visitors. But Phillips pressed forward, sending letters to London that revealed his true intent: to overthrow the king and plunder his treasures. When the British mission entered Benin's territory, they were met not with open arms, but with the might of Benin's warriors. In January 1897 at Ugbine village, Benin's soldiers ambushed the British column. Spears, arrows, and Dane guns rained upon the intruders. Most of Phillips's party was killed. Only a few survivors staggered back to tell the tale. For the British Empire, this was not a defeat to be forgotten. It was a call to vengeance. Within weeks, the British prepared what would become known as the Punitive Expedition. More than 200 soldiers and marines, equipped with Maxim guns, rifles and artillery, set sail for Benin. In February 1897, they landed on the coast and began their march inland. Villages were burned, resistance, and the path to the royal city was carved with blood and fire. The Benin warriors fought bravely, clad in traditional wrappers, coral beads shining upon their necks, and armed with musket, cutlasses, and bows. They fought not only for their king, but for their gods and ancestors. Women joined in rituals of protection. Priests called upon the spirits, and the great moats and walls of Benin stood as the last guardians of independence. But the firepower of the British was overwhelming. Their Maxim guns tore through ranks of warriors who had never faced such weapons. One by one, the defenses of Benin crumbled. By February 18, 1897, British forces stormed the capital. What they found was not only a city but a civilization, a network of palaces, shrines and courtyards filled with centuries of art. The famed Benin bronzes, cast in brass and bronze, lined the royal palace walls, telling the story of dynasties, wars, and sacred rituals. Ivory tusks carved with intricate designs rose like guardians in the courtyards. To the British, these were not sacred relics but trophies. The looting began almost instantly. Thousands of bronzes, ivory carvings, coral regalia, and royal treasures were seized. Fires were set, and the once proud city was reduced to ashes. Oba Ovaramwen Nogbaisi fled the palace as the city burned. With a few loyal chiefs, he sought refuge deep in the forest, carrying the weight of his ancestors upon his shoulders. For months he evaded capture, while the British declared victory and imposed their rule. At last, betrayed by allies who could no longer resist the empire's might, Ovaramwen surrendered. But even in surrender, he carried himself as a king. When brought before the British officers, he wore his coral regalia and stood tall, refusing to bow. To his people, he remained their Oba, even in defeat. In September 1897, Oba Ovonramwen was exiled to Calabar in present-day Nigeria. There, stripped of his kingdom but not his dignity, he lived until his death in 1914. Meanwhile, Benin was absorbed into the British colonial system, its monarchy weakened but not erased. The bronzes and treasures stolen from Benin traveled across the world to museums in London, Berlin, Paris, and beyond. What had been sacred objects became exhibits behind glass, admired but displaced far from the soil that birthed them. The fall of Benin in 1897 was not merely the conquest of a city, it was the violent interruption of a civilization. The British called it punishment, but for the Edo people, it was tragedy, exile, and survival. Yet Benin did not vanish. Its culture endured in the songs, rituals, and stories of its people, in the resilience of its monarchy, and in the enduring spirit of the Edo nation. Today, the descendants of those who resisted still chant the sacred words, Obagato Kaperi Ise. May the Oba live long. And though the bronzes remain scattered across foreign lands, they whisper still of their origins, reminding the world that Benin was not conquered by weakness, but by overwhelming force, and that its legacy is eternal. With this, we have come to the end of today's story. Thank you for watching. God bless. Peace and love.